This is Showtime, a podcast about the people behind the curtain and the stories that shape them. I'm Andrew G, and each week I sit down with creatives, leaders and risk takers from the theatre world and beyond. We talk about what they do, why they do it, and what it really takes to keep showing up. Today, I'm joined by Annie Blood, a lifelong force in Australia's local theatre scene. From backstage in the 1960s to directing plays across South Australia and Victoria, Annie has pretty much done it all. Now she's back at the helm in Noel Coward's Fallen Angels, a sparkling comedy with a little bit of bite. Let's take a glimpse into the passion and purpose that have shaped her remarkable theatre journey. Welcome to Showtime, Annie Blood.
Thank you, Andrew. It's lovely to be here.
You started in the Alfred Hospital revue in the 1960s. What do you remember about that time?
To me, the revue was a very, very sort of special event. It used to happen every year. There were a group of medium-level doctors employed at the hospitals, registrars, who one in particular loved theatre, and had he been permitted to do so, I think probably would have chosen it as a career. So he got together a bunch of collaborators, and they would put on a review, literally a review, like a musical review, and it was very topical. It would poke fun at some of the more pompous people around the place and refer to, particular events. A bit risque, and I just loved working backstage. To me, that was, it was totally different to actually working in the hospital, but you were with people you knew.
And what pulled you into the world of theatre in the first place?
In the first place, gosh, I can remember my parents had friends who lived in the country, in the Mallee, and they came down to stay with us every Christmas, and they loved theatre and would go to as many shows as they could, and that included taking me to a panto. I think it was at the Tivoli. I can't be sure, but I think that's where it was. And I can still vividly remember the smell of the theatre, which is something quite distinctive, and sitting there and watching the curtain before the show opened, and you could just see a little chink of light beneath the curtain and it would be moving a bit. And I was fascinated. I wanted to know what the magic was happening behind that curtain. And I don't think that's ever left me.
And is that what got you into working backstage in the early days?
Absolutely. It wasn't, the sort of magical world that as a child I'd imagined, but there is something special, and it is a magic, I think, for those of us who do spend our time involved with theatre. It's difficult to explain what pulls us, what keeps us there, but there is something.
And you've worn a lot of different hats. You've directed, you've stage managed, you've production managed. How do you move between those roles?
I think it's an overall just love of the genre. I think also I, as a mature student, studied at Monash for a year. I was a member of the Monash Players, which was pretty exciting back in the day. The Alexandra Theatre was new at that time. And I think I just had this hunger to know all there was to know. So I watched and learned avidly from people who did know what they were doing. And I think it was very difficult for me to choose one particular area that appealed to me. I didn't actually get on stage until much later when character parts became available for me, but I've worked backstage since then.
And it's such a commitment, as you know, it's such a commitment getting into a new work. How do you approach it? What draws you to a script, and what turns it from a curiosity to something you want to invest so much time and passion and creativity into?
I have tremendous respect for the playwright, that they can turn their story into something that is palpable and living, and that they give permission to other people to interpret. To me, anybody who I've directed would probably say I can be a real pain about sticking. Don't paraphrase. The playwright has put their heart and soul into this writing, so do them the courtesy of playing what they write. I think that's the thing, mainly, is reading. The first read of a play I need to be able to visualise the characters, pretty much. If I don't get that, then I know this is not something I'm going to be interested in doing.
Do you approach new plays differently to classics?
I think you have to, because with the classics you've heard of them, you know of them, they've been done so many times. With a new play, it's quite exciting actually to see what the playwright has been working with and providing you with.
Do you feel a greater sense of responsibility working on a classic?
I don't know. I think I feel very responsible toward a recently written play. I think there's an element of responsibility, but also a fairly strong index of anxiety that you're going to do it justice if it's a classic, that it's going to be acceptable, but you also try to inject something new, something a bit more challenging perhaps into a classic.
And what's a show that's challenged you the most as a director?
It's tricky. I've only actually directed one Shakespeare, and that was Twelfth Night, and that all of the anxiety and responsibility that I've just been talking about was definitely embodied there.
Because a few people have heard of him, Shakespeare.
Yeah, a few. Yeah, the name's a bit familiar. There is one play that I've actually been involved in with 3 times called The Shadow Box, and it's written by Michael Christopher. It was the first time I actually went on the stage in a serious role. I played a decrepit, dying, blind woman in a wheelchair, which was quite interesting. And it's a play about death and dying, but it sort of got lots of humour, lots of humanity. It's not a dark play by any means. It's tricky staging because it's set in a hospice, so you've got 3 cabins or whatever they are inhabited by 3 quite different lots of people, and you've got to keep the momentum, you've got to keep the connection whilst maintaining the separateness of each of those, and the whole idea is a challenging one. So I think probably that I was in it, and I directed it in Adelaide and actually got a favourable review from one of the more stringent reviewers, and then I directed it again here about 3-4 years ago.
Most of your work has been in local community theatre. What is it that makes local theatre so special?
It's voluntary, for the most part, and you therefore get a bunch of people who are committed, who are doing it because they want to do it, because they love doing it. We used to say, people would look down their nose and say, oh, amateur theatre, and say, no, there's 2 amateurs. There's big A amateur, that's the Amdram, that's the jokey one that the sitcoms talk about. And there's the small A amateur, meaning that in fact you do it as well as you possibly can and stay true to the art form, but you just don't get paid for it. And I like to point out that some of our sporting greats, ex-sporting greats like Lou Hode, Ken Rosewall, the cricket teams that we all still revere here in Australia, were all amateurs, and yet they were local heroes.
How have you seen amateur theatre, local theatre, community theatre evolve over the years?
It sounds bizarre, but it has become more professional in the approach that people take.
How do you mean? What do you mean by that?
The old idea of a community theatre company being comprised of a group of like-minded people who want to put on plays where everybody does something. For each production it might be something completely different. That's pretty much gone. Now it is run, usually you have an administrative body, there are the financial aspects, we have to pay for performing rights and all of the promotion and tickets and everything. So there are costs. We've got to think about our ticket sales and what sort of revenue we can garner in order to put on a production. That's not what I mean by professional, but I think the attitude is one of there is an expectation of excellence, pretty much.
From who?
From within the companies, pretty much, toward those people who might audition to be in a production, to take on a role and who want to be part of it, from people who want to direct particular plays. There's that. And I think the audiences too have certain expectations. And one of the things that's actually quite rewarding in a rather snide way is there are people who say, oh, I wouldn't go to amateur theatre, and then they do go to amateur theatre and come out shocked and surprised at how good it was. And I think probably underpinning a lot of what we all do is trying to create that shock and surprise.
And the audience is such an important part of the process, because without the ticket buyer, there isn't the funding to keep doing what it is that the smaller independent local theatre companies do.
Yeah, that is important. And of course the audience is so important to the dynamic and the success of a performance, of a production. You know, there's a definite relationship between the audience and the performers, the actors, because I've worked on a lot of musicals, not here, but in Adelaide. They're sort of easier in a way because people come along expecting to be entertained, you know, song and dance and a love story or a bit of history or something like that. But with straight drama, there is that relationship. You've got to reach the audience. You've got to engage them. You've got to get them to want to inhabit the world that you're presenting them with.
And there's a lot more competition now too, and I don't mean other theatre production companies. I mean everything, the cricket and footy and the other things you mentioned, but also the things that are on TV, the streaming services, the movies, the social media. There are so many things drawing people's attention, and especially at a time where the cost of living is so high, you've got to be able to draw an audience, to engage them, to encourage them to invest 2 hours of their time and their money in order to come see these shows.
It's not easy, and you're right. There are so many other things that are on offer in terms of diversion. And even with young people, there is that sort of drive to keep them engaged in something all the time. They're not allowed to necessarily explore for themselves. They've got commitments here, music lessons, drama lessons, tennis, football, cricket, extracurricular tutoring, all of those things. It's just top heavy in a way.
Going back to where you started, right through to today, what has theatre taught you about yourself that surprised you?
Well, first of all, I was always a pathetically, painfully shy child. And yet when I did get on stage, I was able to perform, and that surprised me. You know, I don't like people. I don't act anyway these days. But when I didn't like people I knew coming to see me. I wanted them there, but I didn't want to know that they were there. I like to just melt into whatever's going on. But it surprised me that I did have that level of confidence on the stage. I think it's the sense of commitment, the creative energy that, I've always been a bit of a muso, but again, not a performer as such. I used to play piano in a restaurant where it was wallpaper music, the sort of stuff that you only notice when it stops. And that sort of, just the level of confidence and a sense of belonging.
Fallen Angels is the project that you're working on right now with Brighton Theatre Company, opening on the 15th of August. What made you want to delve into this particular play?
There are lots of things going on. It was somebody else actually chose the play and was going to be directing, but unfortunately had to leave. But the play appeals to me because although it's coward and it's sparkly and it's funny, there are some serious messages there, particularly about the role of women and what the expectations of women were back in the 1920s that sadly haven't changed all that much in some instances. There's that. There's also the fact that this is actually the 100th anniversary of the first performance of the play. Wow. It was first performed in 1925. So, and one of our cast has managed to get her hands on an old newspaper of the time. I can't remember which one, but it's actually got a review of the play in that. So we're using that newspaper as a prop. And the content of the play was considered so shocking at the time that they actually referred to the two main characters, the two women, as Slut 1 and Slut 2. So it was quite a bit of moral judgment of the play itself. Of course, Noel Coward was quite brave in his own way.
It was groundbreaking. Back in the 1920s, it was absolutely groundbreaking.
Yeah, it was. I mean, there are some lovely lines in the play where the women actually describe themselves. They talk about being wretchedly happily married for 5 years, and they're bored to snores because they're not in love with their husbands anymore. There's no passion, there's no excitement. And what else are they going to fill their days with? You know, do a little bit of ballet practice and some dusting to show the maid that this is what's expected of her. So there's the two women who are the main roles, and they collude together because in the past each of them had an affair with a dashing Frenchman, and he's in town. And so they're in a bit of a dither because they're not sure whether they're going to see him or not. And most of the humour arises from their anticipation, and they're getting drunk and silly about it. And then the maid in the play, Saunders, is the complete antithesis. She's the servant. She's bossed around by them, but she's free. She's been free to explore all sorts of things. She's been entertaining the troops in the desert. She's been working with the Red Cross. She's been a barmaid. She has worked with some very famous people. She's an expert on golf. She plays the piano beautifully. And she's a happy soul because she's free and she's able to explore her life, whereas these so-called privileged women are stuck.
100 years on, 2025, Noel Coward's Fallen Angels. How do you think it's still pushing boundaries today?
By and large, there's a general acceptance of having multiple sexual partners, either polygamously or, just in series, and there's a lot more tolerance. I think the sexual freedom described and being longed for by the characters in the play is still something that not everybody, and probably most women over 45 don't feel altogether comfortable with. They might envy people who are able to enjoy a certain sexual freedom, but they can't imagine ever participating in that sort of activity. And I think in this play there is no moral judgment of the women. Their behaviour, their attitudes are amusing and understandable.
So what are you hoping audiences take away from these messages?
Theatre person in me hopes they go away having had a good night out and have enjoyed the wit and the sparkle that Noel Coward brings to the stage. And in terms of making them think, I think if they go away thinking how much healthier younger women are today because they are involved in a working life, they feel useful, they can decide what they want for themselves and go after it, rather than it being sort of subterfuge and hidden sort of thing.
And yet all of that happens in a fairly witty presentation. So how have you been working with the performers to balance the messages without judgment, as you say, but still keep that pace and that wit of Fallen Angels?
First of all, the cast are wonderful and interpretive, and they've done a lot of background work. They've researched the period, the era, under the guidance of Joe, who was the original director that was going to be working with them. They've put together a mood board which has sent them off to think about their character, how they're going to look, what they're going to do, what their relationships might have been, and developing a backstory. So they've done that work all on their own. I've got tremendous admiration for them all, the amount of work that they've done. And so they've created a world where they can truly inhabit their characters and be them and understand and react as their characters would have done. And I think that's the thing that carries the plays, that we've still got a little bit of rehearsal time to go, but already the characters are believable. They make us all smile, and we've been watching them over and over and over again and still being entertained by it.
How are you balancing the laughs with what's really going on underneath?
Again, I think it's coming through, and all credit to the individual actors because of the background work that they've done. They've got real people doing silly things or saying silly things. And I think that the reality is, if you like, the touchstone of it all, that these are people who are totally believable. They're funny because they're intelligent and they can be smart and witty, and also they can be extremely silly and do really stupid things. And there's an element of them being typical and predictable, particularly the two husbands who are off playing golf. In fact, one of the female wives actually says there's no passion in our life except maybe golf. That's the beauty of the dialogue, actually. It's a little line like that says so much. And I'm sure there'll be lots of women sitting in the audience going, oh, yeah, I know that one.
So you think audiences today might see themselves in some of the characters on stage?
Yeah, I think there are some things some of the behaviours and some of the things that married couples do and say are more or less eternal. I think quite easy to identify with some of the things that are going on, yes.
I'm chatting with Annie Blood about Fallen Angels, which opens on the 15th of August at Brighton Theatre Company. For more information and to book tickets, visit brightontheatre.com.au. Annie, thank you so much for coming into the studio and took us for the season.
Thank you so much for having me. Lovely talking to you.